If your child's struggling with comprehension, there's a very good chance that it's their vocabulary that is holding them back, as vocabulary is the #1 predictor of a child's comprehension skills. So if that's the case for your child, then these 2 word learning strategies will help. I'm going to go over the 2 word learning strategies that I use with my students. I'll use method 1 for the blue words and method 2 for the purple words. Now method 1 is the method that you want to use whenever you can. If you can't use method 1 because it doesn't always apply, that's when you'll go to method 2. Let's dive in. For method 1, your child is going to become a word mechanic. That means breaking words down into their morphemes. Those are the smallest parts of words that have meaning, figuring out the meaning of those morphemes and then using that to figure out the meaning of the words. Your child will need a little bit of coaching to get into this habit, but once they do, it will mean that they can decode completely new words on their own without an adult and without a dictionary, so it's well worth learning. To apply the word mechanic method, we're going to first look at attentively. Now, a lot of children will encounter this word, think, I've never heard this word before in my life, it's got many syllables, I'm just going to skip over it because I don't know what it means. However, if they have a closer look and they're trained in the morpheme method, then they can break it down into its parts and quite easily figure out its meaning. So attentively comes from the base word attend, and another word that comes from attend is attention. So if your child can spot that attentively relates to attention, then they are more than halfway towards figuring out the meaning of this word. They should also know that the ly suffix, the ly suffix, changes most words into an adverb. So the word attentively is describing how the person looked because that's the nearest verb. Putting all those clues together, we can quite easily figure out that attentively means that someone is paying close attention to something. And there, we very quickly and easily decoded the meaning of this word, even though it might be a word that your child has never seen before. Now, a slightly trickier example is mechanically. Your child may quite easily spot that this word relates to a mechanic. Unfortunately, that doesn't help us a huge amount for this particular word. What does help us, however, is spotting that mechanically relates to machine because the 2 words come from the same Greek root. Now, your child should know what a machine is, and they may have heard of perhaps a mechanical toy or something like that. So if we start thinking about machines, then I had mechanically turned can be thought of as I turned like a machine, which should help your child to figure out the meaning of this word. They may even be able to think of a synonym, something like robotically, once they can start to visualize someone turning mechanically. So that's a good little extension task that you can add where you discuss the synonyms of the words that your child has decoded. Now, all the words in blue here can be figured out using some sort of base word that your child will hopefully already know. Something like singular relates to single, latter sounds like late and has something to do with late or the later part of something, and so on. Now, solitary is probably the trickiest of these words and requires a slightly different technique. Now, solitary requires your child to have at least a basic knowledge of roots and affixes and their meanings. They don't need to learn every root and affix, but learning just a couple of dozen will really help them to decode new words in future. If you want a list of common roots and affixes that I recommend your child learns, just look in the description or caption for this. I'll include a link to a free list. Solitary comes from the Latin root solus, which means alone. Other solus words include solo, solitude, desolate, isolated, and so on. Now, if your child knows that solus means alone, then they can figure out that if there is a solitary woman there, then it has something to do with her being alone. So for words where your child is unable to recognise the base word, knowing a few common roots, prefixes, suffixes can help them to figure out new words as well. Unfortunately, the word mechanic method can't be used for every single word, which is why we have another method up our sleeves. We're going to use this other method to figure out the meanings of the purple words. Now, to help these to stick, I recommend that you use an image-based approach. That's because our brains process images 60,000 times faster than they do words. Having a visual memory cue will also really help these words to stick in your child's memory. If you have the wordier flashcards, you are in luck, as a number of these words come up in the flashcards. By the way, I didn't actually choose this passage because it overlaps with the flashcards, it's just that a lot of flashcard words come up in comprehension passages. So if you have the flashcards, first of all, I would recommend covering the words humble, melancholy, garment and meagre, if you haven't already, using the flashcards, because those pictures are going to help your child to remember the words. If you don't have the flashcards, or for words that aren't covered, then try first of all Googling the word and looking at the picture that comes up. You can discuss this picture, see if your child can guess the meaning of the word, and that discussion is going to help the words to stick in your child's memory for even longer. Once you've done that, find a child-friendly definition for your child to write down. A lot of people will recommend that you use an adult's dictionary. The thing is though, your child's not going to understand the word if they don't understand the definition in the first place. So use a child's dictionary, there's no shame in it. It will be more efficient and more beneficial for your child. I'll post a link to my favourite children's dictionaries for you to use. So, you're going to use an image-based approach. You're going to then look up the word in the dictionary and then try to encourage your child to use the word in a sentence themselves. These 3 steps will help the word to stick in your child's memory for a lot longer. But once you've done all that, you will need to remember to review these words at a later date so that your child doesn't forget them. So there you have the 2 word learning strategies that you should be using every time your child encounters tricky words in comprehension. Now, although it's good to use these strategies when your child's working on English, what's best is for you to have a word learning system in place so that your child is constantly learning new words. That will mean that when they come to a passage like this, they don't have to spend the time learning the new words, they're not held back by that, and they can focus just on the story. But being able to do that will mean that the whole process feels a lot easier and your child should be a more enthusiastic learner, which is always great. Now, if you're looking to get started with a word learning system, don't forget that Wordia has you covered. Our flashcards will allow you to use a little and often approach, or if you're looking for something more intensive, our weekly courses help your child to learn hundreds of 11+ words and make comprehension passages like this so much easier.